At one point in all of our lives, we will experience the painful loss of a loved one, or perhaps a friend or family member may be in the hospital waiting for a life-saving gift. In those moments, we will be faced with decisions about organ and tissue donation. I'm Kim Van Frank, Executive Director of the Mid-South Transplant Foundation.
And I'm Darcy Thomas with Fox 13. Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we are going to share stories of hope and, of course, of life from people just like yourself, who may not have heard of or even understand organ and tissue donation, at least it is until a time of tragedy.
True. And over the next 15 to 20 minutes, you'll learn about and possibly make a decision today that can give hope and life to others in the future. All it takes is registering at midsouhtransplant.org. As we commemorate our 42nd anniversary, we are hoping you will become one of our 100 new donors.
If you do have a comment or question at any time, we're responding in the comments section, actually in real time today. But meanwhile, we're going to keep moving forward with our stories. And we're going to begin with two amazing people who are right here in the Mid-South, who are alive today, thanks in part to someone's special gift.
Well, in 2014, at the age of 28, I went to the doctor with what I thought was a stomach virus.
I went to the doctor for swelling. I was devastated. I didn't understand.
I was in renal failure. Neither of my kidneys were working. My labs were astronomical.
Which ended up being a nephrologist who diagnosed me with nephrotic syndrome, which was a result of too much ibuprofen. It had formed teeny tiny holes in my kidneys and I was losing protein.
That was the day that my life ultimately changed. I am here because someone made the decision, the selfless decision to become an organ donor and allow me to have a second chance at life.
Someone was so caring, so unselfish, that they decided to allow me to continue to exist. I was able to see my son graduate high school, see my granddaughter be born.
Because of Mid-South Transplant Foundation, who serves in the capacity of creating awareness about organ donation in the community, I was able to be transplanted.
There are numerous myths about organ donation, mainly because of the lack of knowledge. There's the myth that they take your body or they allow you to die. They're not going to try to save your life. Different myths like that people believe is the reason that, no, I'm not giving my organs. You're giving someone the chance at life to increase their life, make it full.
And I have a responsibility to help change those myths. One, to correct them on things that are not true, but two, to serve as a living, breathing example that organ donation truly does save lives. Transplant not only saved my life, but it changed my life.
And both ladies are extremely grateful that someone made the decision to click yes to organ and tissue donation. By doing so, this heart was placed on their license showing they are an organ and tissue donor. You can do the same now by going to midsouhtransplant.org to register and help us reach that 100 number before our time is up.
Well, Kim, we know that many people waiting on an organ, they're of all ethnicities. But I did notice that the two women featured in that last story, they were both African American and both were waiting on kidney transplants.
Yes, currently there are 4,000 people in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee waiting for a life-saving organ transplant, and nearly 2,000 of them are African Americans waiting on a kidney. As a result, many of our African American church leaders are helping us out by getting the word out to increase the number of registered donors.
Jesus reminded us a long time ago. He says, greater love has no man than this, than he who would lay down his life for a friend.
We have to be willing to give our most, and to give of your organs is really symbolic of your most.
Donating a heart or donating a kidney can help someone to have a second chance at life. What greater legacy can one leave?
God has given each one of us the ability to continue to be a blessing even after we leave here. And so you can be the change for someone else.
I was shook when they gave me the diagnosis that you're gonna need a transplant. And if you don't get a transplant, you could die. I could die. I mean, that's enough in itself. Then, like at that point, there's nothing you can go do. You can't go pick out an organ. My cousin Bernard, he even, asked the doctor, well, how much it gonna cost? I'm like, you can't go buy a liver, brother. I mean, but after being shook and coming to grips or whatever, and at that point, I had made my mind up. It's just time to fight now. That's all. One of the doctors there at the hospital, my condition was declining even worse and worse. And so then one Friday, called the family. There's nothing else we can do. He has 2 days to live. But May 30th came, and went into pre-surgery prep. I came out a changed man. Because of that now, I'm a donor. I wasn't before. My family now are transplant, organ donors. And I'm so thankful and grateful for my second life.
When we pass from this world, we move on to the next.
When this earthly tabernacle shall be dissolved, we have another building that's not made by hand.
Our bodies will be resurrected with our souls.
We can't take eyes, hearts, kidneys with us.
I want to die whole, I want to die intact, I want to die with everything that I have. All of those are just questions out of fear or statements out of fear.
Because I believe that these bodies decay and because I believe that God is on the side of life, what greater legacy can one leave than to know that they're giving somebody a second chance at life?
God has given each one of us the ability to continue to be a blessing.
By leaving behind assets that other people can use. So why not leave them for somebody who can live life better because we live life well?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Everybody else in the car moving and saying something, and he wasn't saying nothing. Oh, it was a hurtful day. Hurtful day.
Was blind, but now I see.
I was the only one that was per se conscious at the med. And when we got there, my cousin, who's a person that I look up to, he said, there's some people here that want to talk to you. And I got mad because I had just lost the most precious thing in my life. And here were people asking me about my son's organs.
The family were, they were in the hospital and they were being asked. And so the challenge is, do we or don't we? And how could someone have the nerve to ask us this at this moment?
And after probably about 10 or 15 minutes, the transplant people came in and told me they were finna leave. And I told them, I said, no, you ain't gonna believe this, but sitting here talking to God, and the good Lord told me to do it.
So you allow them to filter all of those emotions and those thoughts, and then come to the realization that what would it hurt, and who could it help?
Had the car accident, got mad at God, and swore not to go to church again because I got so mad at God. And just like I said, that small, still voice of God spoke to me and told me, get mad all you want, but you're gonna need me.
African Americans are disproportionately affected by a lack of organ donation, but we are also disproportionately represented when it comes to organ donation.
African American organs and tissue match African American organs and tissue better.
I think we have to do more to get the word out to other African Americans that, hey, this is a need, and it is a need that needs to be met by African American.
As a result, I'm pushing everybody I can to make sure that they register to become an organ and a tissue donor.
As Christians, we know that giving has always been a part of our DNA. Giving our time, giving our talent, and giving our tithe.
Creating a culture of giving in your congregation brings about residual effects.
Organ and tissue donation is within that giving spirit, and it has the same effect.
As a Christian, you should give and encourage those in your congregation to register to be an organ and tissue donor.
We can help make a difference in Memphis, in Shelby County, by taking the consideration of another person's life.
There's over 118,000 people in need of organ and tissue donation of some kind.
So organ donation should be a religious imperative, not a question mark.
So we want you to register today to be an organ and tissue donor because it's all about life. It's all about saving and enhancing lives.
Again, the Mid-South Transplant Foundation is working to increase donors in all ethnicities and ages. That's why we're encouraging you to log on to midsouhtransplant.org today, then tell your family about the decision you've made to share life-saving gifts.
The Mid-South Transplant Foundation has been doing this work since 1976.
Let's take a look back at our 42-year history.
Nationally, kidney transplantation began in the 1950s, and due to advances in medications such as Imuran, this practice moved forward in the early 60s. But for the vision and zealous quest for knowledge of one local Memphis Central High School graduate, the Mid-South wasn't left behind.
Dr. Brett's contribution is enormous. We started out, the tissue typing was in its infancy. Back then, there was no formal organization to the transplant program. Back in '68, we started the development of the HLA lab.
The development of this lab was a tremendous accomplishment at this time, but 1968 also gave birth to the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, which allowed the families of patients who passed on due to brain death to donate their loved ones' organs.
Leroy Hobson had been our patient. He'd been dialyzed by the dialysis unit, and I had known Leroy for quite some time. A young man from North Carolina was a car wreck, or not a car wreck, a truck hit him, and his wife agreed to give his organs. Charles Miller did the tissue typing and all the other preparation for it, and Judy was my secretary, and who eventually became the head of Mid-South Transplant.
It was just a beautiful day to me. It looked like someone just lifted the burden off me, you know.
Life-saving organ donations have been a voluntary act of love and kindness from the very beginning. Without funding, Dr. Britt and his team of 3 or 4 people based their commitment to this new frontier in modern medicine on those same attributes. Despite working long hours and being paid at the rate of volunteers, they moved forward with the quest to save lives. In 1976, Mid-South Transplant Foundation was incorporated, and the local program continued to experience growth even though there was still limited funding even into the 1980s. But with the help of some local corporations, the program continued to soar. Dr. Britt's vision and Leroy Hobson's bravery gave birth to an entire Mid-South medical industry. What began with one resulted in over 200 kidney transplants being performed in the 1970s, more than 500 in the 1980s, and nearly 1,100 in the 90s. Dr. Britt's drive to help improve the health of his fellow man through organ donation and transplantation helped give rise to the transplantation of other organs in the 1980s, when over 100 liver transplants were performed, as well as several pancreas and over 60 hearts. In the 1990s, this growth continued with the first heart-lung transplant being performed by Dr. Edward Garrett Jr. in September 1991. Since the beginning, nearly 3,000 Mid-South patients have received a life-saving kidney transplant.
And for the most part, that message still holds true today, right, Kim?
Yes, since 1976, we've been supporting families making life-saving decisions. However, we realize that people don't understand or hear about us until those tragic times. So we're working to change that by rebranding ourselves.
And are you going to change the name?
No, but we're changing how people see us. We want to let people know what we need and why it's needed. 22 people die each day waiting for an organ transplant. You can help by registering to be a donor today at midsouhtransplant.org. The Mid-South Transplant Foundation connects your willingness to give hope and life with a person waiting for a life-saving gift. Thousands are waiting for transplants right now in the Mid-South. Let your family know today of your decision to be a donor. One organ donor can save up to 8 lives and heal the lives of more than 50 with tissue donation. Randa Lippman is standing by with our staff at Mid-South Transplant Foundation to get a first look at our rebrand. Randa?
Thanks, Kim.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Each day, 22 people die waiting for a life-saving gift. At the Mid-South Transplant Foundation, the solution involves the loving connection of 2 lives becoming one. One side represents the hope in healing following loss, and the other side represents the gift of life for the recipient. Give hope and give life by registering to be an organ and tissue donor today. Visit midsouhtransplant.org.
Kim, I love that. Give hope and give life.
Thanks, Darcy. We've just got a few minutes remaining, so if you're watching online and you're not a donor, I encourage you to go to midsouhtransplant.org, look at our new website, and register today to be a donor.
Now let's meet a couple of people who had to make that very difficult decision on behalf of their families.
It was December of 1999, and my 2-year-old son came down with flu-like symptoms. We kept thinking, once he gets some fluids in, he'll be doing much better. He had had a seizure earlier in the week, but I did not realize really that was a seizure. We were informed by the doctors that our son had had massive brain damage. We were devastated. He was our only child, and all of a sudden, I went from a rambunctious 2-year-old to a very quiet house. My husband and I had always said we wanted to be organ donors, but you don't think about your 2-year-old child. You're asking a lot of people on the worst day of their lives. For us to get connected with Mid-South Transplant, the more I learned about it, the more I believe in organ donation. It helps the donor families a lot of times as much as it helps the recipient families. They were angels to us on our darkest day. It was a way to find hope that day by helping others and knowing that something good was coming out of the tragedy of losing our son. I like to say on his way to heaven, he helped enrich and save 5 lives. He was an angel. In some ways, it saved us as much as it saved the actual recipients.
We got a phone call back in 2014 of May that my son had been shot, and in the process of deciding or waiting for the prognosis of the doctor's report, they discovered and told us that he was brain dead. That was a very tough decision, knowing that Sean was the baby. He was 21 years old, and so probably about a couple months after Sean had passed away and organs had been harvested and recipients had received the organs, we got a letter from his heart. Receiving that letter was like, wow, we actually got a confirmation that what we did was the right thing to do. I'm a 62-year-old husband, father, and grandfather of 2. I was born with a defect heart valve and had 3 open heart surgeries to correct it. Your generous gift has literally saved my life. And I promise you that I will care for your gift well every day. If they saw this video and knew that they received Sean's heart, I would want to tell them thank you for being an open vessel to receive this gift. People are fearful of the unknown, and just knowing that their loved one can help somebody else live, that's one of those fears that you will have to conquer.
Those situations are always difficult. That's why we encourage families to talk about donation and make that decision long before those difficult days occur.
You know, Kim, I've even heard that people are very worried and concerned as they are planning that funeral for that family member. They're concerned about that time and what's going to happen if they jump into the organ donation process.
Yeah, that's a tough topic, and I'm so glad that you asked. You know, someone choosing to help others and give hope and life through donation should not and will not interrupt their loved one's funeral services.
You know, I've even heard that people say that they're questioning doctors on they don't want to register to be an organ donor because they think maybe that doctor won't save them.
I know, and that is absolutely not true. That's one of those false fears we run into all the time. Healthcare professionals and medical professionals, they do everything possible to save a life, and only when it's determined that someone's going to pass away does donation even get considered. And as an added help, let's review the entire process of organ donation as we wait for people to go online at midsouhtransplant.org to register as a donor now.
The first step in the donation process is to get the facts. Learn what you can about organ and tissue donation before making the decision to be a donor. Only when all efforts to save your loved one's life have failed will the hospital contact the Mid-South Transplant Foundation. A specially trained evaluator will determine if he or she is suitable for the donation. The donor registry is checked by the Mid-South Transplant Foundation to see if your loved one is registered. If your loved one is not registered, then your family will make the decision. Once registration is confirmed and/or your family has given approval, the national search will begin for a recipient. Surgical teams are assigned to remove the available organs and tissues, then perform the transplants. Your family can then proceed with funeral plans. Later, your family will receive a letter with the outcome of your loved one's gifts of hope and life.
Darcy, I'm so grateful for your help today and the Fox 13 team for helping us get the word out, especially on our 42nd anniversary. Now we've got to tally the registrations that have come in, and I certainly hope we've reached our goal of 100 new registered donors.
You know, Kim, it has been our absolute pleasure at Fox 13 to partner with the Mid-South Transplant Foundation. We are, of course, working with you to give hope and to give life to so many families we know that are in need. Now, we're going to let you know, we're going to update everyone who has registered, and you can check that out by logging on to midsouhtransplant.org.
Thank you all for joining us today.